For example, the French said, we're gonna let $1 be equal to 6 French francs. British, I think it was 1 British pound bought $1 or something like that. $3 or something like that. And each country, when necessary, was able to devalue their currency by changing that peg. I give the example. After Bretton Woods, $1 was pegged by 1 Turkish lira. In 1957, suddenly $1 overnight became 3 Turkish liras, because Turkey was having big time balance of payments deficits, which meant they're buying a lot more goods and services from abroad than they're selling abroad. Well, that money has to be paid somehow. If you're US, you pay other people in your currency, so you don't particularly care. Currencies like that are called reserve currencies. But if you're Vietnam and nobody's gonna wanna be paid in their currency, which is dong, or Turkish lira, or Russian ruble, what have you. So you have to actually pay them in hard currencies, as we call it. Well, if you don't have the hard currency, what are you going to do? A lot of balance of payments deficits of those countries are typically energy imports. You need gas and oil. You need some basic stuff. So the only way you can get out of that is devalue your currency. Your goods become much cheaper abroad. Foreign goods become more expensive. So at least, if you're importing caviar, well, caviar suddenly is going to be 3 times more expensive. So you'll be a lot less likely to import that. On the other hand, if you're importing oil, you have to import oil. Since one of the lessons from the gold standard was, yes, you can devalue your currency, and there is an adjustment mechanism, but that takes a long time. Even after you devalue your currency, you don't see the effect on the balance of payments or external deficit overnight. It takes a while for a lot of different reasons. One, in many cases, you have contracts, okay? Example, when Walmart buys textile products from abroad, they typically have long-term contracts. They say, over the next 5 years, I'm gonna buy this many bedding sets from you at this price. Even though your goods are cheaper, Walmart is not gonna buy more simply because you have a contract. If they have a need, they can buy more, but it takes time. Plus, there is a lag between prices changing and production decisions. Just because bedding sheets are much cheaper abroad doesn't mean that you actually have the capacity to produce more. You have to add capacity, you have to add shifts, what have you. So that takes a while. But in the meantime, the country is in big time economic turbulence. And we've seen the effects of those in places like Latin America, in coups, military coup d'etat, not coup d'etat, as some people would pronounce it. There was actually a joke like that in Deep Space Nine. This guy says, I don't understand this word coup d'etat. It's not coup d'etat. It was a Ferengi, which is an interesting species. He says, no, it's coup d'etat. And military coups very rarely have positive effects on any place. Okay? And it's almost always, I'm not even talking about just killing a lot of people. And on top of that, there are bad economic effects of coup d'etats. To become popular, they tend to print money. When you print money, there is inflation. So Latin America always had chronic inflation. They still do. especially in places like Argentina. And I wouldn't be too surprised if there was a coup soon, but we'll see. Brazil had similar issues. Definitely Paraguay, Uruguay had issues. And Colombia definitely had it. Only Panama didn't have it. Guess what's the biggest difference between Panama and other Latin American and Central American countries? They don't have their own currency. There is no Panamanian peso. They actually use US dollar as their currency. And we will come to that. But you need some sort of mechanism that's going to help out these countries during that adjustment period. And for that purpose, two institutions were established right after the war. One is called the IMF, short for International Monetary Fund. Basically, the countries in the Bretton Woods system, they each contributed some reserves, or they kept some of their hard assets, so-called reserve currencies and gold, with the IMF, with the express purpose of helping out countries that have to devalue their currencies and need funding during that adjustment period. Typically, they were 5-year programs. Over the 5 years, IMF also said, okay, I'm going to lend you the money, but you got to do something about your fiscal system that always produces these issues. The other one was the World Bank. World Bank also provided loans, but it wasn't for financing external deficits. It was for financing overall economic development. Your Central African Republic, if you know anything about that republic, most of its territory is within the great desert called the Sahara. And, what do you need? You need irrigation systems. Yes, you have rivers close by, but that river somehow, the water in that river has to be taken to fields. You need funding for health facilities, education, what have you. That's kind of the purpose of the World Bank. So that was the system, and there were, I think, 6 major reserve currencies. Obviously, US dollar was one of them, British pound, German marks later on, Swiss franc, French franc, and also Japanese yen later on. These were major. In fact, there was also kind of made up currency called SDR, which is called special drawing rights. It was kind of a basket of these reserve currencies. So you borrowed money in terms of SDR, or you could keep your reserves in terms of SDR. And one of the reasons kind of this system collapsed, for reserve currencies to be used in the rest of the countries, those guys should be running a balance of payments deficit. For example, if US runs an external deficit, and we're going to talk about differentiated concepts of balance of payments deficit, but let's just think about trade deficit. US buys a lot more these days from abroad than they sell to abroad. This was true even before China. Okay? And that means US sends more money abroad. But US kind of has a special place. Their currency is the reserve currency. So if a Japanese firm sells stuff to US, they would gladly accept either Japanese yen or US dollars. Or US can simply use its own currency to buy stuff from abroad. That means US money is going to be sent abroad if they're running trade deficits. So if they are not running trade deficits, they're basically getting money from abroad. That kind of creates essentially in Bretton Woods system and monetary contraction. So there is less money if a country is running, if a country without reserve currency running a trade deficit, there is less money in that country. That means inflation is going to be high. And if that country continuously runs deficits, that means they're sending more and more of their money to abroad. So essentially, supply of US dollars increase, right? What happens in a free market when supply of something increases? If you have suddenly a very good harvest in Florida and orange harvest is double what it normally is, what's going to happen to orange juice prices? They will decrease. In fact, we have financial contracts called orange juice futures. Have you guys ever watched the movie Trading Places? It's an old Eddie Murphy movie. He's a bum, or as we call them, homeless people right now. We don't call them bums anymore, or hobos anymore. You know what hobo is short for? Homeless body. They're not hobos, they're not bums, they're homeless people. Anyway, he plays a bum, and there are these two brothers who are running a company that trades in orange juice futures, and they have a bet, and they say, we're not that important here, we could put a bum here, one of them claims, and it'll still be the same. So they figure, okay, let's make a bet. And they go find Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy becomes the head of the firm. It's basically a string of comedy after that.